My name is Eugen Karanja. I'm a controls engineer. I work in technology and I depend on analytical skills to do my work. Part of the core skills are observing physical phenomena and deriving analytical conclusions. For the electrical controls type of work, I do have legal recognition and permission to accept and complete a project. At this moment in time, social questions have arisen. Why not? Why not do this or that? Valid modern questions and valid traditional answers just got stuck standstill on a dead end of head shakes and dumb stares. Validity of morals, validity of life itself, is in question. Within my technical capacity, I would like to offer an analytical perspective, my understanding of how things work. Maybe a functional model of life as a mechanism can help on the functional role of social aspects. I believe most of the dilemmas can be solved if we properly understood the feminine function. Feminine function is the key to understand current situation and reality at large. But first I have to start with a preamble of my presuppositions. Evolution. We are told and then veered to the consensus that life evolved through natural selection. This explanation means that the external conditions, the material world, is the driving force of the inner change. We are considered a lucky combination of things. Inner changes happen from interactions with the world, the external stimuli. When luck has it that these changes are beneficial, bingo, we have evolution step. So let's take a look at the timeline discovered. The best we know is that 3.8 billion years ago, life started as a single-cell organism. Then 2 billion years ago, it evolved with some sort of a sexual function, still a one-cell type of life. And then it divided through plant, fungi, and animal ancestor, still staying as a one cell. And then 0.98 billion years ago, multi-cell type of life started. At 0.006 billion years ago, human appears and evolves. So in a nutshell, fast forwarding, this is how the evolution of life to the human looks like. So we see that the single cell life continues to evolve for 3 billion years, and then multi-cell life evolves for 0.9 billion years. This time includes close to the end, the monkeys appearing and evolving for 40 million years, with the humans refining themselves in the last 6 million. So a simple organism takes way more time to evolve than a complex one. Let's put this to scale, and this is a quote taken from a site discussing DNA. If you stretch the DNA in one cell all the way out, it would be about 2 meters long. And all the DNA in all your cells put together, so human cells, would be twice the diameter of the solar system. So the scale is staggering. The amount of variables that need to change to create a lucky combination as we go along in becoming more complex from the outward environmental source, with the external being the sole factor, must be staggering. So let's illustrate it further, the game of fate, by throwing the dice. And we have a lucky combination. So we throw one dice and it takes 2 billion years to get a win. Then we throw 2 dice and we win in half the time. It should have been the opposite. But then we throw 1000 dice and win instantly. And wowee indeed. I believe the theory of evolution through natural selection has a math problem. However, the facts discovered remain. Another available option would be that instead of looking outside of life, we can look inside of life as well for the driving force of the evolution. The psyche at the top. You, looking at this video, are 3.8 billion years old. Sure, you have all new cells, but the chain of life had to stay unbroken throughout for you and me to exist. Any expression of life needs the continuity from the beginning. And the question is, continuity of what? At some point, something had to be right, and the right lucky thing was passed on and on. As life iterates, it adds different features over time, but one thing appears very clear, that psyche is at the top of these features. It's life's ultimate advantage. There is no doubt that evolution of life runs parallel with the augmentation of many features. Why the evolution of the psyche? This brain function grows with evolution, and it is the one that sets us humans apart. We can see the culmination with the human at the top of this development, that the psyche is the what that gives us the advantage. How about we look at the goal of the human psyche instead, if we can? Let's consider this quote. Salvation is a long road that leads through many gates. These gates are symbols. Each new gate is at first invisible. Indeed, it seems at first that it must be created, for it exists only if one has dug up the spring's root, the symbol. So this is Carl Gustav Jung. And I will take this quote, which, you know, if we look at salvation as the goal of the psyche. But since we are used to the other terms on the evolution, let's replace salvation and symbol with survival and choice. So, survival is a long road that leads through many gates. These gates are choices. Each new gate is at first invisible. Indeed, it seems at first that it must be created, for it exists only if one has dug up the spring's root, the right choice. Sounds like a good description for evolution as well. So we have a parallel of a quote being concerned with the psyche, and it looks very much pertinent to the evolution of life as well. So I would like to visualize this with another example. So this is a kid's game, and it's called the Battleship, and the point is that we don't know what's happening on the other end, but we must guess. So there's an opposing grid, this is the opposing grid, and this one is our grid. So as a metaphor, I'm utilizing my grid as life, or the life that we know, and the opposing grid, we can call it the unknown possibilities. And as soon as we get a winning combination from that from those unknown possibilities, then we can advance. Okay, so on the unknown possibilities, there is one combination that it will be useful. It would be a combination that will ensure this thing that we call life. And then the life has to figure it out, has to find it. So first it tries, and it misses, and then it tries, and it misses again. And then we have a hit. And then we keep trying until we formulate, or life, you know, if we call it by chance, or we'll see what is that once it formulates a winning combination, something that can form all these characteristics that we call life, then we can start existing. So, and then as soon as that it is being established as a form of life, then we go to the next step on the evolution. So it looks like life is established after a successful connection with the unknown possibilities. It searches and finds what works, and then continues to encapsulate in matter a record of what works to secure further existence and continuity. Another option to explain evolution is more simple, descriptive of the observation, and obvious: evolution of life through accumulation of the psyche. Psyche being defined as the totality of conscious and unconscious life's activity. Could it be that the betterment of this connection is the one displayed as evolution? So let's look at with the point of view that the math, it needs to support this type of expansion of life, as we say, with a timeline that we saw in the beginning. So how to evaluate the progression of life? How to qualify evolution? The scientists that created the chart on the left had a great idea. As life evolves, is more smarter to take care of itself and creates more energy to stay warm. So expressed in milliwatts on the vertical axis, and we can see time so on the vertical axis we have energy in milliwatts, and on the horizontal axis we have time. So here we can actually add another 3 billion years, because we know it didn't change, but the scientists actually checked it. They built this chart, and then here is the actual paper. They started from 0.9 billion years ago, when the multi-cell type of life started. And it culminates, so this chart, it culminates with intelligent men with fire. This is intelligent men with fire over here. To illustrate the metaphor, and maybe to get a little bit cute too, is that we can expand that fire into HVAC. I mean, I'm not gonna go into nuclear power or anything like that, even though that is actual part of this metaphor. But this particular paper discusses that as life evolves, the amount of energy that life uses or conserves or makes use for itself, it goes on this type of scale. If we look on the chart on the right, on this chart, we can see a graph, a curve that is almost identical. It's an identical shape of the one to the left. And this one, I took it from this link pointed out here, is the connection, the internet speed growth rate. So if the one on the left represents the evolution of life, when we take the energy being used by life as the measurement for the advancement, for the evolution, then to the right we can see how connection of a PC with the internet is being evolved, and both, they seem identical. So with that, I rush or I come into a conclusion that, from my perspective, is that life, any life, being organic, synthetic, electromechanical, AI, etc., is a material bridge between two imaginary realms of existence. We can describe this communication as identifying the correct information, a valid combination from the unknown, or we can label it as a find in the unconscious. This valid combination ensures the material's existence, or we can call it a beneficial use of energy. Life's activity manipulates energy, securing the existence and propagation, ability to preserve, repeat, and also add to improvements on the next level of iteration. So strictly observing matter with the purpose of finding the laws of interaction for repeatable beneficial manipulation is something we know, and we call it science. Looking at life activity encompassing matter, a relationship between life when such combination stands the test of time for existence and propagation repeatedly, we can refer to it with a social term as the truth. With a perspective following this line of thought, I would like to qualify life as the result of psyche a little bit further. So, on this slide, I have divided everything that exists into two different possibilities. One is imaginary, and the other one, represented with this white square, is the material. So it cannot be anything else. It's either the imaginary thing, existence, or it's material. So on this one, on the left, which is the imaginary realm of existence, we can put conscious thoughts that are not transferred to matter, are not. So if there is a conscious thought that is not transferred to anybody else, where does that exist? It's still imaginary. And also any unconscious information, so information that we cannot transfer. Obviously at that point it cannot take any material shape. So imaginary realm of existence has all the unknown possibilities, or at least a repository of all the possibility, and is all that is not matter. So this is strictly something that doesn't exist according to our senses. So at the moment that any of this information takes a form, either the word, then that will be sound vibrations, or a written word is going to be a mark in paper or a computer screen or carved in stone, etc. Movements, so a movement can contain this information, whether they are working, transferring something, dancing, making a gesture, social relationships, and unconscious movement of the body. Like maybe there is a message there, but we don't know, but still it becomes real. So we divided this imaginary and real, and anything that is imaginary, doesn't exist, is somewhere there on these unknown possibilities, and then when it appears in matter, then it becomes real to us. So on the individual level, the expression of life will feel something and then follow with some action. A higher form will decode that feeling into a conscious thought and do something as well. A better match to the initial message. So we find this order not only with the individual operation of life, but also with the social structures we build to manipulate matter and materialize. Society operates under the very concept discussed. The way we go about it, as a society, we divide and specialize these tasks. So this very fact is also a collegial proof of acceptance of the very concept, and we'll see what is that concept is the same. For example, a scientist or an artist will be concerned of digging an idea or a physical law from the unconscious. These are the miners for the truth. Then a bigger crew will work to package this truth in a form that can be applied into reality, the real world, engineers, architects, lawyers, accountants, etc. And then following the instructions that this group will, a larger group of people, will then materialize and produce the goods of life. So since the importance of the good idea is self-evident, then the reward for the idea based on truth is bigger. So main focus of this activity is creating and materializing the idea. We go into the unconscious, we find something and we try to materialize it, whether we are individual or the whole society. It is the same process that we follow. So what is the other side of it? Once we create it or we materialized something, then what happens? So then this material reality, we have a reaction to it. We will hear the sounds, vibration if somebody else speaks. We interact with matter and derive meaning. We see the writing, and then obviously we'll have our thoughts to decipher and derive meaning out of it. We interact with matter by touching, smelling, and derive meaning. In order for the information acquired from this interaction with matter to be useful, we have to elevate it into our imaginary realm. So everything that we experience, in order to experience, we have to bring it back into this imaginary realm, somewhere that it doesn't exist. So because only we can perceive it into this imaginary realm, other than experiencing into our imaginary realm, we cannot experience it at all. So the interaction with matter is placed into the unreal information into our psyche in order to be useful to life. The more conscious, the better situation on the imaginary, the more useful it becomes. And further up into the realm of the unconscious, the faster the access and the use. Unconscious repository is anything placed here once the information is well structured into the conscious imaginary. So let's take the example of learning, retrieving information from a manifestation of matter, written, audio, visual, etc. Whether we are learning a subject in the school or even reading a book with instruction, then all that is bringing the information into unconscious. But then once we learn something like riding a bike and etc., then we just unconsciously can tap into that repository. So where does the acquired perception resides? Many can read a book, whether it's fiction, news, or instruction manual, but the results are not the same. Some can quickly reproduce the message and some do not understand. Why, when it is the same book? Where did the difference occur? If this is simply the process of placing information in a material repository, then why the different results? The information needs to be emulated in the conscious level and further to unconscious level. It needs to reside again in our own imaginary realm to be any use of for us. And after that is just like riding a bike. So the type of activity described above is mostly concerned with observing material things like shape, color, movement, interaction, relationship, deriving meaning from the observation and place this derived information back into the imaginary. So here I'll bring another measurement for life. So we said one measurement for life was the use of energy, and the use of energy, it's proportional to our conscious activity and shows the level that we achieve in life. But then how do we measure life, and especially the interaction between different expressions of life or life forms? And that is through the length of time or the impact that such interaction will have into the lifetime of. So the activity of life is materializing an idea and then deriving meaning of the material. So how does all life activity fits together? Is there any ways to measure the personal relationship with the outward reality, relationships with other life and inorganic matter? In other words, how to evaluate the relationship of a being, an expression of life, with everything else, including the function of self-sustenance. So what will be the criteria of this evaluation? One important feature will be the length of existence of the life unit in question, and also the effect on the length of existence of life as a whole. So the length of material existence in relation to life's activity is a measurement we come up within our conscience, and we make it every day. In everyday social life, we call it with the terms good and bad. So with that in mind, I would like to bring attention to this experiment. So in 1961, an experiment shed a different light on the nature of matter. Experiment looks to see what is the nature of matter at the most elemental level. Is it a wave or a particle? And the result is very surprising.
We can gently just observe which slit it goes through. So you put a detector just above the upper slit that will flash or beep whenever it sees an atom go through that top slit. Sure enough, you fire the atoms through, one at a time. 50% of the time, the detector will beep. The other 50% of the time it doesn't, the assumption being that the atom has gone through the lower slit. But of course, I've been cheeky here. I haven't shown you the results of the experiment. That's what you get. 50% of the time, it beeps, and you see a spot arrive adjacent to the upper slit. The other half of the time, it doesn't beep, but you see a spot arrive at the lower slit. So, yeah, it's picked out the atoms that have gone through the upper slit and not the ones that have gone through. So each atom does go through one slit or the other. But that's a different result to what we had earlier. So here's the last bit of sneakiness that we can play with atoms. Surely now, you know, we're going to get to grips with it. Leave the detector there, but just very quietly go and unplug it. Don't let the atoms know that you're not spying on them. Make them think that you're still detecting them. So, yeah, okay, we're going to run the experiment, atoms, okay, get ready, one at a time, we're going to be checking on you. All right, so run the experiment again. Now, if you can explain this using common sense and logic, do let me know, because there's a Nobel Prize for you.
To generalize on this fact, life is created from two functions. One concerned with bringing information from the imaginary realm, from the big unconscious or the unknown, into the real, and the other function concerned of observing, decoding the materialistic creation and matching the meaning back to the imaginary realm, to the conscious, and then maybe further materializing and coding it into the unconscious. This type of activity is what we do every day, and these functions are very familiar to us. So I would call the first function the masculine function and the other the feminine function. With the respect to the manifestation of matter, the important things to us, these functions are equally important as the cycle needs to be closed to ensure existence. However, we can say that the feminine function is more important in securing the first appearance of whatever life creation is, and then the continued existence of something, and that something can be anything. It's a function. It's proportional to this feminine function. With this model of what life is representing a connection, how does that fit on the interaction between different life units or different people? So for this, the best thing to do is to try and find some sort of evidence, even though that might be anecdotal evidence, on understanding how this interaction works. And for this, I'm just looking at some articles, and it shows here that numerous studies covering 140 years have shown that married persons tend to live longer than their unmarried counterparts. So if we look at joining these life units, or joining two persons with dedicated functions to delegate or borrow a fundamental function and consequently amplify life. So not only clearly showing that the length of life it's actually lengthened, it's more beneficial, but also the fruits of life, whatever there might be. So here we can see that married men earn more, at least 50-year-old man, for example, will earn $50,000 more a year than the unmarried man. Now, these are anecdotal evidence because they were never meant to look at something like what I'm saying. But nevertheless, it clearly shows, and the first article here, it shows without any doubt that there is a beneficial factor. And that beneficial factor to my opinion, it needs to be looked at, or it could be attributed to joining of the masculine and the feminine functions to enhance the connection, or to enhance life. So if one can specialize into the masculine function and the other can specialize into the feminine function, the new unit that is made out of both, they will both benefit. It will be a more powerful connection. So now that we know, or at least I have an opinion, an idea of how these social interaction are, then we can say that all social interaction are enabled by love. In this way, any interaction we have in life is literally enabled by love. Activities like care for each other, picking and doing a particular job, not doing any job, getting active and socializing, isolating away, violence and also war is also enabled by the ability of being connected to each other as part of the whole, and this connection making possible to give or retrieve one of the fundamental functions. So if we have an issue with one of the functions, then we go out in the world to find it. In some cases, the world becomes a hunting ground for personal shortage of these functions, but then joining forces in search for the lacking or lost function can become a scary reality. And that scary reality, it is what it's making me to do this video. So, we are all 3.8 billion old manifestation of that very first cell unit. So in that, I guess it's also a literal description of all of us being one. I'll make an attempt to discuss the topic of social structure. This is my best guess based on what I read and experienced. I do reserve the right to update it as more information becomes available, especially from big data. So as we saw in the case of a couple, because of love, should be better to live with more life, as it will feature a better connection with the source. If love is joining of various life units to amplify the connection with the source, then reciprocate altruism is actually at the function of this connection, is at the center of each relation. So we are expecting something in return, whether this something is conscious or unconscious. So most likely it's an unconscious. So this is our personal connection. As we fit in one of these triangles, we are contributing in one way and then expecting something in the return. And when it's unconscious, is most likely the feminine function or the approval. So with this in mind, what is the best social structure to enhance life? So as a baseline here, plant life is the baseline. Is I made it in green. It needs only inorganic matter to create life. Therefore, it does not depend on other type of life. So if that is the baseline, how can we do better than that? So, well, theoretically, it will be mining for the truth, trying to advance and advance. It will be more beneficial. So, it will give us more advantage and a new level of existence. As we can dedicate efforts to find more truth or align with the truth, then we experience a world of abundance and good luck, and that is the goal. The problem is that the measurement, the proof of being on the right track, is the material creation, like that abundance, the favorable circumstance, the bounty of life. How can we keep this as a measurement? How can we keep the outcome as a measurement and not the goal? From history, looks like we can't. Instead of the creation becoming the fruit of our connection, we become obsessed into hoarding material and sacrifice our connection and prey on other life to secure the confirmation of our ways. So we let we turn this from, let's say, above plant to less than plant, when we actually just consume the matter in order to exist, rather than create our environment. And some of the markers that will show this will be that instead of the choice, our personal choice, then we'll comply from fear, and in order to prove, we have to resort to lies. So as we go further and further away from the source, then maybe we accumulate matter, but we also accumulate a big unconscious debt or unconscious fear. So for example, over here, you will look at everybody above with a lot of fear, because literally your life depends on all these other connections with the source. So nevertheless, we let the social structure meddle with our connection, and since our choice, when we go below the plant life, our masculine does not align with the truth, then naturally there will be no internal confirmation or external confirmation, real confirmation that it will sit back, and there will be no feminine function to secure the continuance of our social structure, our environment, and it will result on destruction. So relying on a social structure that breaks or meddles with our personal connection, it doesn't look to be a good idea. So in conclusion, is that the masculine function gets information from the source. To materialize, the feminine function chooses the right the one that aligns more closely to the truth and reports back on the results. So without this dialing back, there is no existence. As symbolic meaning goes, in a dark night, which it's our conscious existence, the moon is the only sign we get for the existence of the sun. In the same fashion, the function of the feminine to send back to the unconscious the very fact that something needs to be written back is actually the proof for the existence of another realm, is the existence of a source. And why not? The feminine function is the proof for God. This is just a theory, and your own life, your experience is the best place to look and see if it makes sense or not. Thank you for watching my video.